Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Sam33 here, and welcome to the show about Pokemon TCG stuff. Mix up. I should really come up with a new catchphrase because this show is one of many shows involving Pokemon that I do, and they all have to do with Pokemon. But anyway, today we're going to be talking about a deck that has recently been rebirthed into the format. And for those of you who do not understand that reference, that is Ho-Oh EX and its deck. This card was used back in. For a while, it was used. Mostly, it was used in cities of last year, in 2012 to 2013, and that's when its prime was. And at that point, it was definitely a very good deck. A lot of players really liked it. Of course, Kyle Pukasukovic, that was like his deck basically. I mean, other people played it. In fact, I played it before it was even popular. But yeah, he did play that. I even did a video on it back then because it was still a relatively rogue deck. And I mean, it existed before that, and it kind of existed a little bit after that, but that was its prime. And since Energy Switch has rotated, it recently died out. But since it's been reprinted again, it's good again. I actually brought this deck to a league challenge, which was right before Cities, and I got third place at that, which I shouldn't even have gotten third place because one of my opponents scooped me because I was down pair. But anyway, for those of you who think I'm a total idiot and want me to shut up, here you are. Here is your video that you came to watch.
So if we're going to rebirth Ho-Oh, we've got to start by knowing what it does. Ho-Oh's got some really poor stats. For starters, it's got 160 HP. Not many attacks can reach 160 without going past to 170 or 180, but you'd be surprised how much 10 HP can matter sometimes. It also has a water weakness. 3 of the most popular decks right now have water Pokemon, which is much more than any other type can say. It's got 2 retreat cost, which is especially bad considering Ho-Oh's attack and ability, which we'll get to later. It's got fighting resistance, which could definitely be a worse resistance, such as nothing at all. Anyway, now it's time to look at Ho-Oh's main feature, its ability. Its ability, Rebirth, says that if Ho-Oh is in the discard, you can flip a coin. If heads, you put Ho-Oh onto your bench with 3 different basic energies from your discard, to keep with Ho-Oh's theme of rainbows. Speaking of, its attack is called Rainbow Burn, which costs 3 colorless energy and does 20 damage plus 20 for each different type of basic energy attached to Ho-Oh. It's nothing compared to the likes of X-Ball and Secret Sword, but it's an alright attack when paired with its ability, or in the face of grass Pokemon. So if Ho-Oh's attack is no good, what's the point of the card? Well, the reason for Ho-Oh's playability is in Energy Switch. This card is why the deck is getting reborn. Basically, you stuff your deck with a bunch of attackers that use 1 or 0 colored energy, usually ones that counter popular cards, a bunch of different basic energy, and use Rebirth and Energy Switch to get energy onto your attackers quicker. In terms of energy acceleration, this is about as minimalist as you could get. It relies on an item card, which can also be used for other things. Nevertheless, the deck definitely has its perks over other basic beat stick decks. The basic decks have a big problem with being too simple. If one of your attackers has weakness to one of your opponent's attackers, you're low on options. With Ho-Oh, you're going to have at least a few counters to your opponent's deck, as well as plenty of attackers that are okay against their deck, so you'll have plenty of good options throughout the game. So I've talked about all these other attackers, but you still don't even know what they are, do you? First, let's take a look at the old cards that Ho-Oh's always been using. The first is good old Mewtwo EX. Mewtwo's always been the king of putting on early pressure and having late game potential. While Ho-Oh was great at getting that last energy tour on Mewtwo to clean up the game, Ho-Oh needs time to get itself an energy in the discard, so Mewtwo will only have your initial attachments in the opening turns. Psychic Pokemon, e.g. Mewtwo, are also much less prominent than when Ho-Oh was first popping up, so Mewtwo makes the perfect centerpiece for this deck. Next up is Bouffalant. EXs are a thing, and Bouffalant is very good against them. While there are definitely less EXs now than there was then, it'd be foolish to say that they aren't a huge part of the format anymore. To power up a Bouffalant, all you need is a DCE and an Energy Switch. The main reason for Bouffalant in this deck is for Black Kyurem EX. There really isn't anything else that works against it. Bouffalant does a nice amount of damage, while also only giving up 1 prize. And if they try to use Keldeo, you can come in with a Mewtwo and KO it in 1 hit. Without Bouffalant, the Blastoise matchup, I don't even want to think about it. Then we have Terrakion, the quintessential tech card for Ho-Oh. Darkrai is just as good now as it was back then, and nothing crushes the land of Darkrai better than Terrakion. This card was born for Ho-Oh. 1 colored energy attack, great counter to a popular deck, useful in a wide range of other matchups. Really, the card is too good not to play. As I said, there are other matchups Terrakion can work in. 90 damage for 2 definitely isn't something to laugh at. The only difference between then and now is Hypnotoxic Laser. the reason Terrakion died down in the first place. If your Pokemon dies from poison, Retaliate doesn't activate. Also, Night Speed with Dark Claw, Laser, and Burbank is enough to KO Terrakion in one hit. Even with Laser, Terrakion is still the best you've got against Darkrai. Next, there's Sigilyph, truly a classic card in this deck. As said with Bouffalant, EXs define the format. With Catcher being nerfed, it would seem that Sigilyph's even better at disrupting your opponent. Well, there are a couple new additions to the format that weaken Sigilyph's charm. As said with Bouffalant, more non-EXs are being played these days, so if they play even a single way to deal with Sigilyph, they can easily dispatch its measly 90 HP. Hypnotoxic Laser is another way to deal with Sigilyph, since with only 3 between turn phases, your Sigilyph will go down. The last reason is Escape Rope, which bypasses Sigilyph just as well as Catcher. Tornadus EX is next on the list. If you play Laser and Burbank, he can do some decent damage turn 1, assuming you go second, and it really isn't bad in any matchup. The only matchup it could become a liability in is against Plasma, because Thundurus hits it for weakness for 1 energy, but even in that matchup, it can one-shot Kyurem with the Laser and Burbank. Back then, you had to worry about Zekiels, so other than the new rules, which this deck doesn't like in general, Tornadus is even better than before. If you feel like you need another attacker, but not sure what matchup you want to improve, Tornadus will be a nice inclusion. Our last golden oldie is going to be Landorus EX. It's not quite as good as an attacker against Darkrai, since it's harder to catch your Darkrai on the bench before it's powered up, but a really nice perk of Landorus is the sniping damage. No one wants to waste a catcher trying to KO a Pokemon with 30 HP or less left, which is where Landorus comes in. Even against those pesky water types, Landorus can come in at the last minute and take those last prizes. The only problem with this card is Mr. Mime. When that thing's out, Landorus is essentially useless. Mr. Mime has been spreading like a disease recently, so Landorus may be the first veteran to bite the dust. That's it for the old guys, but there are plenty of new Pokemon to spice up the deck. The first is Cobalion NV. While obviously the card is very old, its main use is definitely not. Kyurem is one lean, mean, frozen machine that can really wreck most of your attackers, and Cobalion is one lean, mean, frozen machine hard counter. If you're worried about the Plasma matchup, Cobalion will sure improve it for you. Then there's Suicune, which is really just a slightly better version of Sigilyph. If you want to play some other water or psychic Pokemon, just choose the one that fits the energy type of that Pokemon. But if you have no other influence in your decision, Suicune is probably the better choice. Our next card is Tropius. It's a nice card against Keldeo, and while Mewtwo is already great against Keldeo, Tropius has the perk of being non-EX, which can really make a difference in the Blastoise matchup. A fun little tech card you can include is Zekrom. It's used mainly in the Empoleon matchup. If they hit Zekrom, you can KO their Empoleon back, and getting a free knockout against Empoleon is definitely something you'll need in that matchup. If they use Leafeon, just play smart and keep the right amount of energy in play, and hope you can catch an Empoleon to get a free KO anyway. That matchup is really tough though, so if you think this card will push the matchup over the top for you, then go ahead and include one. Next is Meloetta BC, which is basically a tech for Tool Drop. It can one-shot a Trubbish even with an Eviolite, and that's about it. You know it's a sad day in the world when you have to include a tech to KO a Trubbish. Another option is Absol. While it's not a tech for any specific matchup, although it is pretty good against Empoleon, Mind Jack is a really good attack. It's also a really good card for killing those stupid Dusknors. Absol is at least useful in just about every matchup, so including it definitely isn't a bad option. Another interesting attacker is Kecleon. If you find yourself deep in a Mewtwo war, and you're losing, Kecleon can KO Mewtwo back for only 3 energy, or 2 in a laser. And with all the different types of energy in this deck, there are tons of potential attackers for Kecleon to use. There's also Revenge Bouffalant, a nice clean 90 damage for a better cost than Terrakion. Only problem is after that 90 damage, it really can't do much. After you attack with it, you're going to have to bring it back to the bench. I'd say this is kinda like Tornadus' non-EX counterpart. Not great in any particular matchup, but nice in just about any of them. Chandelure EX is up next. Chandelure's purpose in this deck is basically the same as Landorus. There are a few differences though. Chandelure will always do just enough damage to KO your opponent's Pokemon, and can even KO 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon at once. But the best part about Chandelure is that unlike Landorus EX, Chandelure can hit through Mr. Mime. Mr. Mime pretty much renders Landorus useless, so having that advantage over Landorus is very nice. Chandelure does however have a much worse second attack than Landorus, as well as a worse weakness and type, so there are definitely perks to both of them. Overall I think Chandelure is the better of the two. Mr. Mime is something you will run into, and not having to deal with it for once is pretty nice. We also have the other EX from Legendary Treasures, Excadrill EX. Its fighting typing makes it alright against Darkrai. It's more powerful than Landorus, and easier to power up than Terrakion. With Laser, you can 2-hit KO Darkrai pretty easily. and if you're really lucky, you just might discard a Ho-Oh or a basic energy with Dig Out. We've also got Virizion EX. I know what you're thinking. At this point, you're just stuffing any Pokemon you can think of in here, aren't you? Well, to some extent, but definitely not Virizion. The purpose of this card is for Verdant Wind. As long as you only need one specific colored energy for each Pokemon, you can use a grass energy for that spot and give your Pokemon immunity to lasers. Laser is nothing to take for granted, and any way to get around them is always welcome. There's also Genesect EX, which can KO Blastoise, Keldeo, and lets you play Plasma Energy to give you a catcher effect without the flip. Only difference is you gotta waste your attachment for that turn, and with this deck, I honestly think you can't afford to do that most of the time. You also have to make room on your bench for it, which this deck definitely can have trouble doing. I think Catcher is the better alternative here. Speaking of Catcher alternatives, for our final tech card, we have the duo of Ninetales Dragons Exalted and Ninetales Legendary Treasures. Ninetales is another good way to use Catcher, only this time you don't have to waste an attachment to use it. But you also have to get a Vulpix out ahead of time, which can definitely slow down the process a lot of the time. There are also a lot of decks that have the ability to KO Vulpix before you can even use Ninetales. One upside of Ninetales is if you play Hypnotoxic Laser, Ninetales can work as a pretty cool attacker. The Ninetales from Legendary Treasures is also a good attacker against grass and metal types. The only reason you'd want to use this guy over Ho-Oh is against Klinklang decks, since Klinklang's ability blocks the metal types from EXs. So if for some reason your area has some Klinklang rolling around, you can include Ninetales from Legendary Treasures to help out. Woo, that was a lot of tech cards. So now that we've looked at every possible option, we need to make a deck list for them to be played in. The first list is going to be a very basic list that's focused on putting on pressure. It uses lasers, catchers, and not as many tech cards as you think. Here's the list. For early aggression, we have 3 Mewtwo EX. 3 makes it very likely we'll start with it, and there's no matchup where just putting down Mewtwo is a bad thing. Maybe attaching to it, but not just playing it. Only 2 Ho-Oh EX because starting with Ho-Oh is just awful. It has 2 retreat, and starting with it means you'll only be able to get 1 rebirth off the whole game, unless your opponent knocks it out. We also have 2 Bouffalant in here. Against Blastoise, you can never have too many of these guys, or really any matchup. It also helps with putting on early pressure. A turn 2 Goldbreaker Laser is really deadly, and definitely feasible with 4 DCE. I chose Landorus EX over Chandelure in this deck, just because I didn't think I could run enough Psychic Energy to make it work. Even without having Chandelure, Landorus is still worth including. We also have Cobalion in this deck to improve the Plasma matchup. If you want, you can swap out the Cobalion and Metal Energy for another tech, like Suicune, Diglett, Chandelure, Absol, it's up to you. But I've found Cobalion to be the best out of those options. Virizion, in my opinion, is definitely worth its space in this deck. Blocking lasers is just such an incredible power to have. There's no free retreater in this deck, so Switch doesn't really work for getting rid of lasers. It doesn't work all the time, but it doesn't really have to. Just removing poison once or twice can swing the game in your favor. And with Energy Switch, you can get those grass energy on your Pokemon pretty easily. Virizion is definitely a card I'm keeping in here for a long time. 4 Ultra Ball is for more consistently getting Ho-Oh and energies in the discard, and with this deck, they can't really clump up your hand, since if you've got 2 of them, you can search for Ho-Oh with one, then discard it with the other. Energy Switch is the reason this deck is even good, so running 4 of them is obvious. Catcher is still my favorite way to get that catcher effect. Ninetales and Genesect just weren't as consistent for me. Hypnotoxic Laser works very well with Mewtwo and Bouffalant. Think of Laser as an extra energy for Mewtwo. With Bouffalant, they're forced to switch out of the poison, or they die going into your turn. Even if they switch out, you can finish them off with Landorus, or Chandelure. I think the 3 switching cards is enough. With Virizion, you won't need to switch out of poison very often. The split is 2 switch and 1 float stone. The float stone is there to give you a free retreater when your active dies and you're not sure what to send up. The supporter count is still something I'm trying to figure out. Right now I've settled on 4 Juniper, 4 N, 2 Bianca, 2 Colress, and 1 Skyla. Originally I didn't have the Skyla, the Biancas, or one of the Colress, and instead had 4 Random Receiver. Juniper is so essential for getting Ho-Oh in the discard, and Random Receiver gets you Juniper much more often. But the standard flaws of Random Receiver arise when playing them. It's very possible for you to burn through all of your supporters, or burn through enough so you don't draw into them anymore. And sometimes you just don't want to use a Juniper or an N. I'm fine with the Bianca and Colress, but I'm not so sure about the Skyla, especially without Energy Search. Ho-Oh just needs too many cards each turn for Skyla to be on par with the other 4. For the A-Spec, I decided on Computer Search. The reason I chose Computer Search is because it much more consistently helps you get Ho-Ohs in the discard, and it's never a dead card. Some other options are Scramble Switch and Scoop Up Cyclone. There aren't enough items in this deck for Dowsing Machine to be very useful. With Scramble Switch, you can move all 3 energy off a Ho-Oh to whatever you want. It also has too many other good uses to list them off. Scoop Up Cyclone can pick up a Ho-Oh you started with, or pick up one you moved all the energy off of already, and discard it again. I still prefer Computer Search though, just for the sheer consistency of it. My energy line is 4 DCE, 3 Fighting, 3 Grass, 2 Metal, and 1 of any other type. I'm pretty satisfied with this line. It lets you use all of your colored energy attackers pretty consistently, and you don't have to worry about your one specific energy card being prized. I'd consider adding another type of basic energy, but I don't really know what to take out for it. And there's our final list. So what do I think of the deck? Well, overall, I like it. I wouldn't say it's top tier or anything, but I wouldn't say it's bad. It doesn't have amazing matchups, but it sets up pretty consistently, and all of its matchups have some sort of way out. I'll talk about its matchups once we've looked at all our lists. Speaking of the rest of our lists, here's our next list. This one cuts out the lasers and focuses more on tech cards. Let's take a look at our teched out list, shall we? This time I wanted to play either Sigilyph or Suicune. I also wanted to play Chandelure EX, so I decided to play Sigilyph. I've already explained why I like both of them, so let's just move on. One thing to add though, Sigilyph with Virizion is very powerful. Tropius was also included to improve the Blastoise matchup. It works especially well with Sigilyph, because if their only way to KO Sigilyph is with Blastoise, then Tropius can KO their Blastoise back. Return can also work as a way to get out of a terrible hand. Our next tech is the less obvious one, Max Potion. Max Potion is a great card against Darkrai. They're so reliant on getting double knockouts, and Max Potion can stick a huge wrench in their plans. But just like any other tech in this deck, it's not dead in every other matchup. Plenty of decks are annoyed by Max Potion. When it comes down to it, not many decks can complain about having a Max Potion, and Ho-Oh is no different. This version has a lot more basic energy, and that's because they are a tech too. Having more diverse energy makes Ho-Oh's attack stronger, and easier to pull off when you need it, which is almost required against Virizion decks. So now for my final thoughts on this variant. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of this one. Lasers are just such a strong card, and without them, a lot of your cards become a lot weaker. Mewtwo doesn't get KOs as easily, and it becomes impossible for Bouffalant to KO things going into your turn. The only matchup this list greatly improves is Virizion decks. One upside is you get less hands that are cluttered with items, such as Laser and Ketchup. I know that's a big draw for some players, so if you don't trust my opinion, there are definitely reasons to play this one over the other. And for our last list, we have a sort of crazy and untested idea. So, Bouffalant's pretty good, right? Well, why not exploit it as much as possible? To really get the most out of Bouffalant, we're going to use Silver Bangles and Hypnotoxic Lasers. To make room for all this, we're going to have to cut out some of the techs. Okay, a lot of the techs. Let's just take a look at the list and you'll see how much I mean. Yeah, all that's left is Mewtwo and Terrakion. Mewtwo's just too good to pass up, and I feel the Darkrai matchup would just be too hard without good old Terrakion. Because the only thing we have that uses colored energy is Terrakion, we can play lots of different basic energy. This makes Rebirth quite a bit more consistent. Other than that, the list is the same basic idea as the other two. As I said before, this list is totally untested, because of time constraints. I think the list is at least decent though. If you like the idea, go ahead and try it out for yourself. Let's hope for the both of us that it works well. And now that we've looked at all the deck lists, we're going to look at the matchups. For those of you new to competitive play, matchups are how well a deck performs against specific other decks. The straight Darkrai matchup is, surprisingly, about even to slightly unfavorable. The matchup used to be one of Ho-Oh's best, but since then, Hypnotoxic Laser came out, which changes things quite a bit. Your main attackers are Terrakion and Bouffalant, and both can be one-hit KO'd by Night Spear with a laser. Even though you have Virizion, it's hard to get a grass energy on every single one of your attackers. Going crazy with Terrakion is very hard, because you can't catch your Darkrai easily, and they can just use Sableye and set up for a knockout on the next turn. Landorus is alright, but if they play Mr. Mime, it doesn't really do all that much. I think the main problem is not having your own Mr. Mime. Playing it might not be a bad idea, but you'll be stressed for bench space for sure if you do. That 30 damage can really get around after a few turns. If they don't play Absol, or you can KO it early on, you might be able to lock them out of the game with Sigilyph or Suicune. Overall, if you come in with the mindset that the matchup's the same as it's always been, you'll be sorely mistaken. The best tech cards for this matchup are Terrakion, Landorus, Excadrill, and Max Potion. Darkrai Garbodor is a bit worse, but not that much worse. While Rebirth and Verdant Wind are great abilities, you don't need them to function. By playing Garbodor, they lose a lot of the consistency, and you may be able to catch them without an attacker for a few turns. If they try to spam Crushing Hammer and Enhanced Hammer until you run out of energy, it usually won't work. Just use Mewtwo and don't discard too many energy, and you should be good. Overall, unfavorable, but not unwinnable. The same tech cards work here too. Brazion Genesect is a positive matchup. You should lead off with Mewtwo or Bouffalant and hope to KO their first Brazion. While doing this, you need to discard Ho-Oh and a lot of basic energy. Then, once they KO your Mewtwo, use Ho-Oh and Rainbow Burn Genesect until you win. This can go wrong if you just don't draw well enough to get a Ho-Oh and energy in the discard, or flip enough tails on Rebirth. Without Ho-Oh, they're going to beat you in the prize trade. It doesn't take too many attacks from them to win the game, especially with G-Booster. But most of the time, you set up a Ho-Oh and take the game. The best tech cards for this matchup are as many different basic energy as possible. Brazion Mewtwo is also favorable. If you played in the age of Mewtwo Wars, you should know how to play this matchup. Don't bring up Mewtwo until you can 1-hit KO their Mewtwo, then they'll KO your Mewtwo, then you'll KO their Mewtwo, and so on. If they keep using Brazion, use Ho-Oh or Bouffalant. If they use Bouffalant, use Trakian or any other fighting type. If they use Mewtwo, well, you know what to do. Good tech cards for this matchup are as many Mewtwo as possible, Trakian, and Excadrill-EX. Plasma is yet another good matchup. Both Cobalion and Mewtwo work pretty well versus Kyurem. Trakian works against Thundurus, and while Deoxys can one-shot Mewtwo, Mewtwo can one-shot Deoxys about as easily. The only problem I can see arising is Lugia-EX, but if you just use Mewtwo, it can't take 2 prizes on you. The only usable tech cards for this matchup are Cobalion and Trakian. Blastoise is really bad. You just don't have enough 90X attackers that you can consistently use to beat them in the prize trade. You only really have Bouffalant and Terrakion to use against Black Kyurem, because if you use an EX, you'll surely lose the prize trade. If you can use Sigilyph or Suicune to force the only Blastoise they have to attack you, then you can use Mewtwo and leave them without a Blastoise. If they use Black Kyurem to KO every one of your 90Xs, they may run out of energy, but if they switch to Keldeo, you can KO them with Mewtwo or Tropius. The problem is you're already using so many of your attachments and energy switches to power up Trakian and Bouffalant that you might not have a return KO on their Keldeo. If you somehow have enough resources, you might be able to get a cheap catcher kill with Genesect on their Blastoise or Keldeo. Really, your only hope is that they run out of energy using Black Ballista, or you somehow have enough resources to KO enough of their Keldeos. The best techs for this matchup are as many non-EX attackers as possible, and grass types. Empoleon is also very bad. If you can use Mewtwo or Tornadus to somehow KO all of their Piplups, you'll win, obviously. But if they get even a couple Empoleons, you're doomed. With Max Potion, you'll need to get out one heck of a Mewtwo to one-shot them, and if you don't, they'll just heal it off. If you attach every energy you can to get one Mewtwo, you won't be able to power up another one. With Silver Bangle and Dusknoir, they'll be able to take all of their prizes with ease. The only tech for this matchup is Zekrom, which will only get you one knockout, and then you'll probably lose anyways. Tool Drop is yet another toughie. While Mewtwo can do heavy damage early on, once they get going, they'll just curve stomp all your Mewtwo's into the ground. There isn't much you can do for the matchup. There are a few 90Xs that might help though. Meloetta and Bouffalant LT work pretty well for getting one knockout. If you're looking to beat Tool Drop, I'd play a different deck. And there are the matchups. Overall, I'm not the biggest fan of this deck. It sure is fun to play, but its matchups are just a little too weak for it to be competitive in my eyes. If you could get it to work, I wouldn't be surprised, but sometimes, some decks just don't work for certain players.
And there you go, that's Ho-Oh in a nutshell. Not a deck I think I'll be playing again, but it's definitely a deck you guys should try out. It's really fun, and especially if you're just going to the league and play a couple fun matches there, that's a great deck to bring there. It's also pretty good, and it's fun, so yeah, great deck for league. So next episode of Mix Up / Back to Reality will be on my City Championships report. I've gone to quite a bit of those already, and I've done quite well, I must say. Better than I usually do, and I'll still be going to more cities in the future. There's 2 coming out this weekend, and then I think that'll be it. I don't think I'll be able to go to the New Jersey Marathon. That's a little too much for me. I haven't been in a marathon yet, and it's a little daunting to play Pokemon for 4 days straight. But for those of you going to the marathon or any other cities, good luck to you all. I hope you get some packs and championship points, and yeah. So yeah, I go to pretty much all the cities in Pennsylvania and Delaware. So if you see me, say hi. I'll be wearing a Pikachu hat. I always love beating fans. It's really something that brightens my day. And yeah, next episode cities. I might have one more rogue deck before I do my regionals report. I am working on a rogue deck right now. I'm not sure if I want to post a video about it because I'm actually sort of good now. I sort of feared, not really feared, but I'm someone to worry about in a tournament, and I'm not sure if I should give away my deck. But I might just for you guys because you guys are really what gets me my views and stuff. So I owe it to you guys. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Later.